The stars had never seemed so close to Earth until the day humans learned to jump between them. 3 years had passed since the first human ship broke through the barrier of light speed and found a galaxy full of life. Most of that life wanted nothing to do with the newcomers from a small blue planet, except for the Valorans. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of New Geneva Station, watching the Valoran transport ship approach. The vessel looked like a living thing made of crystal and metal, its surface shifting colors as it moved through space. Inside that ship were her friends, her allies, and perhaps humanity's only real hope of finding a place among the stars. The first meeting between humans and Valorans had happened by accident. A human exploration ship had broken down near the edge of Valoran space. Instead of ignoring the distress call or demanding payment for help, the Valorans had simply appeared and offered assistance. No questions asked, no payment demanded. They helped because help was needed. Captain Rodriguez had been commanding that broken ship. He still talked about the moment when the Valoran rescue vessel had docked with his crippled cruiser. The airlock had opened, and beings 12 feet tall with skin like living gemstones had walked through. They spoke in harmonious tones that sounded like music, and their first words in broken human language were simple. "You need help. We give help." That meeting had changed everything. The Valorans were not like the other species humans had encountered. The Hegemony Council treated new species like children who needed to be taught proper behavior. The Kresh Empire saw humans as potential slaves or soldiers. The Zephyrian Collective wanted to study human brains like laboratory specimens. But the Valorans treated humans as equals from the very first moment. Elder Zephyr of the Deep Harmonies was waiting for Sarah when the transport docked. The elderly Valoran moved slowly, his crystal skin showing deep blue patterns that meant contentment in their visual language. His 3 eyes, arranged in a triangle on his large head, focused on Sarah with what she had learned to recognize as affection. "Friend Sarah," Zephyr said in his musical voice. "The harmony grows stronger with each meeting." Sarah smiled. After 3 years, she still found Valoran's speech patterns charming. They never used simple words when beautiful ones would work better. "Hello, Zephyr. How was your journey from Luxara?" "The void sang with possibilities," Zephyr replied. This was his way of saying the trip had gone well. The council grows worried. Our friendship troubles them. This was why Zephyr had come to New Geneva Station. The Galactic Council had been making threats. 3 species controlled the council and had done so for thousands of years. The Nexari looked like giant spiders and controlled most of the galaxy's trade routes. The Vorthak were warriors who commanded the council's military forces. The Etherians were energy beings who claimed to be the galaxy's spiritual guides. All 3 species agreed on one thing: new species should know their place. Humans and Valorans working together as equals was not how things were supposed to work. "What kind of troubles?" Sarah asked as they walked through the station corridors. Other humans stopped to stare at Zephyr. Most had never seen a Valoran up close. The alien stood out not just because of his size and crystal skin, but because of the way he moved. Valorans walked like they were dancing to music only they could hear. "The council demands we end our technology sharing," Zephyr explained. "They say humans are too young to understand advanced sciences. They want us to treat you as we would treat children." Sarah felt anger building in her chest. This was always the way with the older species. Humans had gone from discovering fire to traveling between stars in just a few thousand years. That speed of development scared species who had taken millions of years to achieve the same things. And what did the Valoran Assembly say to that demand? Zephyr's crystal skin shifted to show golden patterns. In Valoran body language, this meant defiance. "We told them that wisdom is not measured in years, but in actions. Humans show wisdom. We will continue to share." The friendship between humans and Valorans had produced amazing results. The joint colony on Kepler 442b was thriving. Human engineering skills combined with Valoran biological sciences had created technologies neither species could have developed alone. The colony's power systems were based on Valoran biocrystals that converted sunlight into energy with perfect efficiency. The buildings were made from human-designed smart materials that could repair themselves using valerin healing principles. More importantly, the colony was becoming a symbol. Dozens of younger species had sent representatives to see how humans and valerins worked together. Many of these species were tired of being treated like servants by the Council. They wanted what humans and valerins had found: true partnership between equals. "There is something else," Zephyr said as they reached Sarah's office. "Other species are asking to join our alliance. The Crystari sent a message. The Bendani want to establish trade agreements. Even some Neloth are interested." Sarah knew this was huge news. The Crystari were master engineers who built ships that could travel faster than anything else in the galaxy. The Bendani controlled rich mining worlds that the Council taxed heavily. The Neloth were explorers who had mapped more of the galaxy than any other species. If all these groups joined together, they could challenge the Council's control. "How many species total?" Sarah asked. 47 have made contact," Zephyr replied. "They call themselves the New Voice Coalition. They want representation in galactic government. They want the same respect we have given each other." This was exactly what the Council feared. For 3,000 years, they had maintained power by keeping younger species divided and dependent. A coalition of newer species working together could change everything. Over the next few hours, Sarah and Zephyr planned humanity's response to the coalition's requests. They would host a gathering on Kepler 442b. Representatives from interested species would be invited to see the human-valerin partnership in action. If things went well, they might be able to form a real alliance that could demand changes from the Council. As evening came to the station, Sarah and Zephyr stood again on the observation deck. The stars looked different now than they had 3 years ago. Then they had seemed cold and distant. Now they were home to friends and allies. "Do you think the Council will try to stop us?" Sarah asked. Zephyr's skin shifted through several color patterns before settling on deep purple. Sarah had learned this meant he was thinking carefully about something serious. "The Council believes in order above all things," he finally said. "They see our friendship as chaos. They see the coalition as a threat to stability. They will act to preserve their version of order." "What kind of action?" "I do not know," Zephyr admitted. "But we must be ready for anything. The harmony we have built is precious. There are those who would destroy it rather than let it grow." Sarah nodded. She understood the risks, but she also understood what they were building was worth those risks. For the first time since humans had reached the stars, they had found their place in the galaxy. They had found friends who saw them as equals. They had found hope for a better future. Looking out at the stars, Sarah made a promise to herself. Whatever the Council tried to do, humanity would stand with the Valerins. They would protect the harmony they had built together. They would show the galaxy that friendship between species was not just possible, but powerful. The stars were no longer cold and distant. They were full of possibilities. The attack came without warning, like lightning from a clear sky. Captain Marcus Rodriguez was reviewing supply reports in his office on Luxara when the alarm started screaming. The sound cut through the morning harmony of the crystal city like a knife through silk. Outside his window, the singing spires that reached toward Luxara's twin suns suddenly went silent. "All stations, this is Rodriguez," he spoke into his communicator. "What's our status?" The voice that answered him belonged to Lieutenant Chen, Sarah's younger sister, who commanded the embassy's sensor station. Her words came fast and scared. "Captain, we have massive energy signatures dropping out of hyperspace. Council fleet markings. I count at least 200 ships." Rodriguez felt ice form in his stomach. The Council had never sent more than a dozen ships to Luxara before, and those had been for formal diplomatic visits. 200 ships meant only one thing. "General quarters," he ordered. "Get me a channel to Elder Zephyr immediately." But as Rodriguez ran toward the command center, he could see through the crystal walls that it was already too late. The sky above Luxara was filling with the dark shapes of Council warships. They hung in the air like vultures, blotting out the light of the twin suns. The first shots came from orbital platforms that had appeared as if from nowhere. Quantum disruptors, weapons banned by every galactic treaty, lanced down from space. Where they hit the singing spires, the ancient crystal structures didn't just break, they screamed. Rodriguez had never heard anything like it. The crystal buildings of Luxara were alive in ways human science barely understood. They grew from the planet's core, shaped by valerin will and fed by harmonic energy. When the disruptors hit them, they died. And their death song was the sound of pure agony. "Captain!" Lieutenant Chen's voice cracked with panic. "The spires are collapsing. The whole city is coming down." Through the embassy's crystal walls, Rodriguez watched the impossible happen. The Tower of Deep Thoughts, a spiral of blue crystal that had stood for 50,000 years, twisted and fell like a dying tree. The Palace of Gentle Winds, where Elder Zephyr held court, shattered into a million pieces that sang one last note before going silent forever. The Valerins were running. Rodriguez had never seen them run before. They moved with their usual grace, but there was terror in their movements. Parents carried children in their forearms while their crystal skin flashed desperate colors. The elderly and wounded were helped by the young and strong. "Rodriguez to all embassy personnel," the captain broadcast. "Emergency evacuation protocol. We get as many Valerins out as we can." The human embassy staff responded like the trained professionals they were. 28 humans against an entire council fleet was hopeless, but they had Valoran friends to save. The embassy's small transport ships launched immediately, racing to pick up refugees from the collapsing city. Rodriguez himself took a shuttle to the palace ruins, hoping to find Elder Zephyr alive. What he found instead was a nightmare. Council Marines in powered armor were moving through the crystal rubble, hunting for survivors. When they found Valerins, they didn't take prisoners. The captain watched from cover as a council soldier found an injured Valoran child, maybe the equivalent of 8 human years old. The child's crystal skin was cracked and leaking blue fluid. It looked up at the soldier with confused trust, expecting help. The soldier raised his weapon and fired. Rodriguez screamed and charged from his hiding place, but more council marines appeared. He had to run or die, and dead humans couldn't save anyone. He ran, but the image of that murdered child burned itself into his memory. The evacuation went on for 3 hours while Luxara died around them. Human shuttles darted between the falling spires, picking up Valoran survivors. Some embassy staff died in the rescue attempts. Ensign Parker was crushed when a crystal tower fell on his shuttle. Lieutenant Williams was shot down by council fighters while evacuating a Valoran school, but they saved who they could. 347 Valerins made it to the human ships before Rodriguez finally ordered retreat. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was everyone they could reach. As the human ships fled into hyperspace, Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the transport vessel Mercy and watched Luxara burn. The planet that had been a jewel of crystal and light was now a broken wasteland. The singing spires lay in ruins. The Valerins who had survived were scattered to the winds. Elder Zephyr of the Deep Harmonies had been found in the palace ruins. He was still alive when Rodriguez reached him, but the quantum disruptor blast had shattered his crystal skin beyond healing. The old Valoran's 3 eyes focused on his human friend with difficulty. "Marcus," Zephyr whispered, his musical voice now broken and quiet. "The harmony is ending." "No," Rodriguez said, kneeling beside his dying friend. "We'll rebuild. We'll make new harmonies." Zephyr's skin flickered with weak golden patterns. "Promise me. Remember us as we were. Remember the songs." "I promise." The elder died holding Rodriguez's hand, his crystal skin going dark and silent, forever. The official council broadcast came 6 hours later. It was delivered by High Counselor Nexus Prime, the spider-like leader of the Nexari. His mechanical voice showed no emotion as he explained the necessary action on Luxara. The Valoran Republic was developing illegal temporal weapons, Nexus Prime announced. Their research threatened the stability of space-time itself. The Council acted to prevent a catastrophe that could have destroyed entire star systems. No evidence was shown. No trials were held. No appeals were allowed. The Valorans had been tried, convicted, and executed by Council decree. The 47 species of the New Voice Coalition received the message clearly. This is what happens to those who challenge the established order. The few hundred Valoran survivors scattered across the galaxy like seeds on the wind. Some found shelter with friendly species. Others hid in the deep space between stars. All of them carried the memory of their destroyed homeworld and the knowledge that the Council's justice was no justice at all. Rodriguez's ship reached Earth 7 days later. The captain's report was broadcast across every human network within hours. Footage from Luxara showed the destruction of the crystal cities. Images of murdered children and burning spires filled human screens. The reaction was immediate and massive. Protests erupted in every major human city. The Earth government found itself facing a population united in fury like never before. Humans who had never agreed on anything before suddenly spoke with one voice. The massacre of the Valorans would not stand. President Elena Vasquez addressed the world from the steps of the Global Assembly building. Behind her stood the Valoran. Survivors, their crystal skin dim with grief but their heads held high. The Council believes that might makes right, Vasquez said, her voice carrying to every corner of human space. They believe that age grants the right to murder. They believe that newer species exist only to serve older ones. Today we tell them they are wrong. The president's next words would be remembered for generations. The Valorans showed us that the galaxy could be better than this. They showed us that different species could be true friends. The Council killed them for that friendship, but they will not kill the dream. We will honor our fallen allies. We will remember their songs, and we will make sure that what happened on Luxara never happens again. Behind the president, the surviving Valorans began to sing. It was a funeral song for their lost homeworld, but it was also something else. It was a promise that the harmony would continue, even if the voices had changed. In hidden bases across the galaxy, the scattered members of the New Voice Coalition received humanity's message. Some species pulled back in fear, afraid to share the Valorans' fate, but others listened to the human president's words and the Valorans' song, and they felt something new stirring in their hearts. Hope was not dead. The harmony would continue. And the Council would learn that some things could not be destroyed by force. The transformation of humanity began in the shipyards of Luna. President Vasquez stood in the vast construction bay, watching sparks fly as thousands of workers assembled the skeleton of Earth's first dreadnought. The ship was massive, larger than anything humans had ever built. But size wasn't what made it special. What made it special was why it was being built. How long? She asked Admiral Sarah Chen, who had been promoted from ambassador to fleet commander in the days following Luxara's fall. 6 months for the first squadron, Chen replied. 18 months for the full fleet. The Valorans are helping with the biological components. Their biotechnology combined with our manufacturing capacity is producing results even I didn't think were possible. The Admiral gestured to a section of the ship where Valoran survivors worked alongside human engineers. The aliens' crystal hands moved in careful patterns, growing living metal that would form the ship's self-repairing hull. The technology was Valoran, but the application was purely human. The Council has never faced anything like this, Chen continued. They're used to fighting species that build ships the same way for thousands of years. We're creating something entirely new. President Vasquez nodded. The past 3 months had seen humanity change in ways no one could have predicted. The massacre on Luxara had awakened something in the human soul that had been sleeping since the old days of Earth's wars. But this wasn't the random violence of humanity's past. This was focused. This was purposeful. Every human colony had volunteered resources for the war effort. Mining stations in the asteroid belt worked around the clock. Agricultural worlds sent every spare ton of food to support the construction crews. Even the most peaceful human settlements demanded to contribute to the fleet that would avenge the Valorans. But the ships were only part of the change. Humanity was building alliances in ways that stunned galactic observers. Species that had been enemies for centuries were now working together under human leadership. The reason was simple. Everyone had seen what happened on Luxara, and no one wanted to be next. Report from the Crystari shipyards, Chen said, reading from her tablet. They've completed the first batch of hunter-killer corvettes, Fastest ships ever built with weapons that can punch through council armor. The Bendani Mining Consortium? Full production. They're providing raw materials for the entire Alliance fleet. Their contribution is significant. Vasquez smiled, grimly. Significant was an understatement. The Bendani controlled some of the richest mining worlds in the galaxy. Their contribution to the war effort was bankrupting the Council's own suppliers. The President's communicator chimed. "Ma'am, you have a priority transmission from the Neloth exploration fleet. Put it through." The hologram that appeared showed Captain Veltar, a mantis-like Neloth whose species had been exploring the galaxy for millennia. His translated voice carried excitement. "President Vasquez, we have located 3 Council supply depots that are poorly defended. If your forces can reach them, the disruption to their logistics would be enormous. Send the coordinates to Admiral Chen," Vasquez replied. "And Captain, thank you. Your people's assistance has been invaluable. The Council has treated us as hired servants for too long," Veltar said. "It is time for change." This was the pattern, repeating across the galaxy. Species that had been oppressed or ignored by the Council were joining the human-led alliance. They brought ships, resources, and most importantly, information about Council weaknesses. The Etherians had thought their energy-based existence made them untouchable. The Valorans had developed countermeasures that the survivors shared with humanity. The Vorthak believed their warrior culture made them unbeatable in combat. The Crystari engineers had analyzed their tactics and found exploitable patterns. The Nexari controlled trade through their monopolies. The Bendani miners were now their competitors. But what really shocked the galaxy was humanity's approach to warfare. Most species fought the same way their ancestors had fought for millions of years. Humans had been fighting each other for their entire history and had learned that survival meant constant adaptation. Admiral Rodriguez, promoted to lead the assault fleets, demonstrated this during the first major engagement. The Council had sent a punishment fleet to attack human shipping near the Centauri trade routes. They expected to find civilian freighters and maybe a few escort ships. Instead, they found Rodriguez's task force waiting for them. The battle lasted 14 minutes. When it was over, 37 Council ships were drifting wrecks, and not one human vessel had been lost. The Council crews who survived the engagement told the same story. The humans had fought like nothing they had ever encountered. They moved like a single organism, one Vorthak officer reported. Their ships coordinated in ways that should be impossible. When we damaged one vessel, 2 others immediately moved to cover it. When we tried to retreat, they anticipated our movements and cut off our escape routes. What the Council officer didn't understand was that human naval doctrine had been developing for centuries. From the age of sail to the nuclear submarine era, humans had learned to fight as fleets rather than individual ships. The Council's forces, for all their advanced technology, still fought like medieval knights seeking individual glory. But technology wasn't humanity's only advantage. Psychology was proving even more effective. During every engagement, human ships broadcast the same message on all frequencies. It was footage from Luxara, the collapsing spires, the murdered children, the death of Elder Zephyr. The message that followed was simple. Remember the singing spires. Justice comes for those who slaughter the innocent. The effect on Council morale was devastating. Many Council species had not known the details of what happened on Luxara. They had been told it was a military action against weapons developers. Seeing the reality of murdered civilians and destroyed cities, many began to question their leadership. Desertion started small but grew rapidly. Entire Council fleets began surrendering rather than fighting. Some species withdrew their forces from Council command entirely. The Helios Collective announced they were reassessing their membership in the Council. The Quantum Assembly declared themselves neutral in the conflict. In her private office aboard the command ship UES Harmony, Admiral Chen reviewed intelligence, reports that painted a picture of an enemy alliance falling apart, but she knew the core Council species wouldn't give up easily. The Nexari, Vorthak, and Etherians had too much power to lose. They'll make a stand somewhere, she told her staff during the daily briefing. Probably at one of their major strongholds, We need to be ready for their best shot. Commander Torres, the fleet's intelligence officer, nodded. Our sources suggest they're concentrating forces at the Hegemony Station complex. It's their primary military depot and symbolic center of power. Chen studied the tactical display showing Hegemony Station. It was a massive construct, built over centuries and defended by the most advanced weapons the Council possessed. Taking it would require everything humanity and its allies had built. How many ships can we bring to bear? Chen asked. Full Alliance fleet, Torres replied. 230 human vessels, plus 400 from our allies. It will be the largest space battle in galactic history. Chen looked around the room at her officers. These were the people who would lead humanity's greatest test. Some had been ambassadors before the war. Others had been explorers or traders. Now they were all warriors, united by the memory of Luxara and the determination to ensure it never happened again. Then we finish this, Chen said. We show the galaxy that the age of council tyranny is over. We show them that the future belongs to those who believe in justice, not just power. Outside the command ship, the Human Alliance fleet stretched across space like a constellation of stars. Each ship carried the hopes of species that had been oppressed for too long. Each crew member knew they were fighting not just for revenge, but for the right of all species to live free from fear. The harmony that the Valorans had begun was growing stronger, even as it prepared for war. Soon the Council would learn what happened when they tried to silence the songs of freedom. The Trilarian Nebula had been chosen for its remoteness. Council Admiral Thexvar believed his patrol fleet would encounter only scattered refugees and maybe a few desperate raiders. Instead, he found himself facing something that challenged everything he thought he knew about warfare. 30 human ships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. They moved like they were connected by invisible threads, each vessel responding to the other's movements instantly. Admiral Chen's task force had been hunting Council patrols for weeks, and this engagement would prove different from anything the galaxy had seen before. Unknown vessels, you are in violation of Council space, Admiral Thexvar transmitted. Surrender immediately or face destruction. The response came on all frequencies simultaneously. First, there was video footage from Luxara. Crystal children, dying under Council weapons, singing spires falling in agony. Elder Zephyr breathing his last words. Then came a voice, calm and cold as space itself. We are the children of Earth, allies of lost Luxara. We remember the singing spires. Today, justice finds you. Admiral Thexvar had fought in dozens of battles over his long career. He had never heard anything like the certainty in that human voice. But he commanded 60 ships against their 30. The numbers were in his favor. The battle lasted 14 minutes. When it ended, not a single Council ship remained operational. Some had been destroyed outright, their hulls cracked open by weapons that seemed to ignore their shields. Others had been disabled by energy bursts that turned their own systems against them. A few had simply stopped working when their computer networks became infected with programs that no one could identify. Admiral Thexvar's flagship was among the survivors, but barely. His weapons were dead, his engines were failing, and his crew was in shock. The humans had not just defeated his fleet, they had dismantled it like mechanics taking apart broken machines. How? He asked when the human Admiral Chen appeared on his view screen. We outnumbered you 2-1. Chen's expression was neither angry nor proud. She looked tired, like someone who had done a necessary but unpleasant job. You fought like your ancestors fought 1,000,000 years ago. We learned to fight differently. The human admiral was right. Council tactics had not changed in millennia. Individual ships engaged individual enemies. Formations were ceremonial rather than functional. Victory went to whoever had the most powerful weapons or the strongest shields. Humans fought as a collective intelligence. Their ships shared sensor data in real time, creating a tactical picture that no single vessel could achieve alone. When one ship was damaged, others immediately adjusted to cover its weaknesses. Their weapons were designed not just to destroy, but to disrupt and disable, turning enemy strengths into vulnerabilities. But the technology was only part of what made the human war machine so effective. The other part was psychological. Every human ship broadcast the same message during battle. Footage from Luxara, followed by the simple phrase, "Remember the singing spires." But they also did something else. They offered mercy to enemies who surrendered, and they kept their promises. Council crews who gave up found themselves treated better as prisoners than they had been as soldiers. Wounded enemies received medical care. Captured officers were allowed to send messages to their families. This confused many council species, who had been taught that humans were savage barbarians. The confusion grew when human forces began capturing council supply bases instead of destroying them. Traditional galactic warfare involved annihilating enemy infrastructure. Humans took control of it and used it against its former owners. At the Kepler Supply Depot, Admiral Rodriguez's Marines stormed the facility and found something that changed the nature of the war. The depot's computers contained detailed records of every Council military operation for the past 50 years. The data revealed atrocities that made Luxara look small by comparison. The coral species had been extinct for 30 years, wiped out, for refusing to pay tribute to the Council. The Venice homeworld had been sterilized because their scientists had developed faster-than-light communication without Council permission. Dozens of smaller species had simply vanished from galactic records, their only crime being inconvenient to Council interests. "Broadcast this," Rodriguez ordered his communications officer. "Send it to every species in the galaxy. Let them see what the Council has been hiding." The revelations shattered any remaining support for the Council among neutral species. The Helix Federation formally declared war on the Council. The Wanderer clans offered their services as scouts and raiders. Even some traditional Council allies began questioning their loyalty. But the core Council species fought back with increasing desperation. The Vorthak launched a massive assault on the human colony at New Geneva. They brought 200 warships and expected to find a lightly defended civilian target. Instead, they found Commander Torres commanding a defense force that included humans, Valorans, Crystari, and a dozen other species working in perfect coordination. The Battle of New Geneva lasted 6 hours and ended with the complete destruction of the Vorthak attack fleet. The surviving Vorthak commander, General Krextall, was captured when his flagship was boarded by human marines. The interrogation that followed revealed the Council's new strategy: terror attacks on civilian targets, hoping to break human morale through mass murder. "Your people will learn to fear us," Krextall snarled at his human captors. "We will burn every human world until you submit." Commander Torres looked at the alien general with something approaching pity. "You still don't understand, do you? You think we're fighting for territory or resources. You think this is about power." "Then what is it about?" Torres gestured to the viewport, where the remains of the Vorthak fleet drifted in space. "It's about the fact that you murdered children on Luxara. It's about making sure you never murder anyone's children again. You can't terrorize people who aren't afraid to die for something bigger than themselves." The Vorthak general fell silent. In his warrior culture, death in battle was honored. But dying for others, especially for aliens, was a concept he could not grasp. Meanwhile, Admiral Chen was preparing for the war's decisive battle. Intelligence reports indicated that the Council was concentrating all their remaining forces at Hegemony Station, their primary military stronghold. The station was a fortress built over centuries, defended by weapons that could destroy entire fleets. "It's going to be costly," Admiral Sarah Chen told the Alliance War Council. "They're putting everything they have into defending that station. We could lose half our fleet taking it." Elder Harmony of New Growth, one of the surviving Valoran leaders, spoke in her musical voice. "The cost of not taking it would be higher. As long as Hegemony Station stands, the Council can rebuild. As long as they can rebuild, other species will die as ours did." The Crystari Admiral Vexhai nodded agreement. "My people have analyzed the station's defenses. They are formidable, but not impossible. Combined human alliance tactics could penetrate them." Rodriguez leaned forward. "What about casualties among the civilian population? The station has millions of non-combatants." "We offer evacuation," Chen replied. "Anyone who wants to leave can do so. We're not the Council. We don't target innocents. The decision was made. The full Alliance fleet would assault Hegemony Station. Every ship humanity and its allies could gather would participate in the attack. It would be the largest space battle in galactic history, and its outcome would determine the future of civilized space. As the fleets gathered for the final assault, human ships continued their psychological warfare campaign. But now the message had changed. Instead of just broadcasting footage from Luxara, they were sending something else: testimonials from freed slaves, messages of hope from liberated worlds, and promises of a better future for all species. The Council's answer was to execute prisoners and broadcast their own message of defiance, but their words rang hollow when compared to the evidence of their crimes. More Council allies defected. More neutral species joined the Alliance. The war machine that humanity had built was more than just ships and weapons. It was an idea that all sapient beings deserved freedom, dignity, and justice. It was an idea worth fighting for, and worth dying for. Soon that idea would be tested in the fires of the greatest battle the galaxy had ever seen. Hegemony Station hung in space like a dark metal moon, bristling with weapons that had defended Council power for over 1,000 years. Its massive structure could house entire fleets, and its orbital defenses had never been breached. Today, that would change. Admiral Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching the largest fleet in galactic history approach the Council's last stronghold. 600 ships from 40 different species moved in perfect formation, their hulls reflecting the light of the system's dying star. This was humanity's promise made real, that the massacre of the Valorans would be answered. "All stations report ready," Commander Torres announced. "The fleet is in attack formation." Rodriguez nodded. 3 days of battle lay ahead, he knew. The station's defenses were legendary, but they had been built to fight enemies who followed traditional tactics. The Alliance fleet had other plans. "Begin." "The siege," Rodriguez ordered. The first phase was unlike any battle the galaxy had witnessed. Instead of charging straight at the station, the Alliance fleet spread out in a vast sphere, surrounding Hegemony Station completely. Human ships equipped with Valoran biotechnology began growing crystal arrays that disrupted the station's energy, shields. Crystari fast attack craft darted between the defensive platforms, planting charges with surgical precision. High Admiral Nexus Prime watched from the station's command center as his perfect defenses began to fail. The spider-like Nixari had commanded galactic forces for 3 centuries, but he had never faced anything like this coordinated assault. "How are they penetrating our shields?" he demanded. His Etherean advisor, a being of pure energy named Transcendent, Void, flickered with agitation. "They are using Valoran biocrystal technology, the same science we tried to eradicate on Luxara. It resonates with our shield frequencies and cancels them out." "Impossible," General Krexvor snarled. The Vorthak military leader had escaped the destruction of his fleet at New Geneva and now commanded the station's defenses. The Valorans were pacifists. They had no military applications for their science. "They do now," Nexus Prime said grimly. "The humans taught them." This was the truth that the Council had failed to understand. The Valorans had been peaceful, but they were not naive. When they shared their technology with humans, they had also learned human military doctrine. The survivors of Luxara had spent months adapting their biosciences for war. On the second day of the siege, Admiral Chen's fleet broke through the outer defensive ring. Human ships moved like schools of fish, flowing around the station's weapons fire and striking at weak points. When Council forces tried to counterattack, they found themselves fighting shadows. The Alliance fleet used Neloth exploration data to navigate asteroid fields that Council ships couldn't follow. "They're not fighting to capture the station," General Krexvor realized. "They're fighting to isolate it." He was right. The Alliance strategy was to cut Hegemony Station off from all support, then force its surrender through siege rather than direct assault. Council reinforcement fleets found their approach routes blocked by minefields and defensive positions. Supply convoys were intercepted by raiders who seemed to know their routes in advance. The Council's member species began to break. The Helix, Collective formally surrendered and offered to join the alliance. The Quantum Assembly declared independence from Council authority. Even some Nexari trade houses began negotiating separate peace agreements with human diplomats. On the third day, the end came not with explosions but with words. President Vasquez arrived at the battle zone aboard the diplomatic vessel UES New Harmony. The ship's hull was embedded with fragments of crystal from the ruins of Luxara, and its name carried a promise. The harmony that the Valorans had begun would continue. High Admiral Nexus Prime, the President's voice carried across all frequencies. You have lost. Your fleets are destroyed, your allies have abandoned you, your station is surrounded. Surrender now, and your people will be treated with mercy. The response came after an hour of silence. Nexus Prime's mechanical voice sounded tired, ancient. What are your terms? Dissolution of the Galactic Council, war crimes trials for those responsible for genocide, reparations to the surviving victims, and a new government based on representation for all sapient species. Another long pause. Then, and if we refuse? President Vasquez looked out at the massive station, thinking of all the beings inside who had never chosen to be part of the Council's crimes. Then we will take the station by force, and the casualties will be on your conscience, not ours. But either way, the age of Council tyranny ends today. The final surrender came 6 hours later. Nexus Prime, Transcendent Void, and General Krexvor formally dissolved the Galactic Council and submitted to Alliance authority. The station's weapons powered down. The shields dropped. 3,000 years of unquestioned rule ended, not with violence, but with the recognition that resistance was futile. The trials that followed were broadcast across the galaxy. For the first time, the survivors of destroyed species could tell their stories. The families of the murdered could demand justice. The evidence of Council atrocities filled entire databases. Some of the guilty were sentenced to imprisonment. Others faced execution for genocide. But many received mercy they had never shown their victims. President Vasquez had meant what she said about treating defeated enemies humanely. The new Galactic Federation was born in the chambers where the Council had once ruled. But these chambers looked different now. The hierarchical seating that had placed older species above younger ones was replaced with a circular arrangement where all representatives sat as equals. Elder Harmony of New Growth, speaking for the surviving Valorans, helped write the Federation Charter. Her musical voice filled the hall as she read the opening words. We, the sapient species of the galaxy, unite in the belief that all thinking beings are created equal. We reject the tyranny of age over youth, strength over weakness, or tradition over justice. 47 species signed the charter on the first day. Within a year, over 200 had joined the Federation. The promise that had begun with human valor and friendship was spreading across the stars. Admiral Rodriguez, now promoted to Defense Secretary of the Federation, stood in the rebuilt memorial gardens on Luxara. The planet was slowly healing. New crystal spires were growing from the ruins of the old ones, their songs blending Valoran harmonies with melodies from a dozen other worlds. Human and Valoran children played together among the singing crystals, just as they had before the massacre. But now they were joined by young beings from many species. Crystari hatchlings with their jeweled carapaces, Bendani cubs with their soft fur, Neloth larvae that would one day spread wings and explore the void. Do you think we did the right thing? Admiral Sarah Chen asked, joining Rodriguez among the crystal gardens. She had retired from military service to become the Federation's first ambassador of interspecies relations. Rodriguez watched a human girl teaching a Valoran child how to whistle while the alien youngster showed her how to make crystals sing. The sound they created together was something new. Not quite human music, not quite Valoran harmony, but beautiful in its own way. The Valorans believed that different species could create something greater together than they could apart, Rodriguez said. We proved they were right. The Council tried to silence that harmony, but they only made it stronger. In the years that followed, the Galactic Federation became what the old Council had never been, a true union of equals. Trade flowed freely between member worlds. Scientific discoveries were shared openly. Conflicts were resolved through mediation rather than force. The humans who had led the war against the Council found new roles in the peace. Some became explorers, seeking out new species to invite into the Federation. Others became teachers, sharing human military doctrine with defensive forces that protected Federation space. Many became diplomats, using the lessons of war to prevent future conflicts. The Valorans, though few in number, became the Federation's moral guides. Their philosophy of harmony between different forms of life provided the foundation for a government that worked for everyone, not just the powerful. And in the crystal gardens of Luxara, the memorial to the massacre bore a simple inscription, in dozens of languages. They tried to silence the songs of freedom. Instead, they taught the Galxy to sing. The harmony that had begun with friendship between two species now echoed across the stars. The Council's attempt to preserve their version of order had created something much more powerful. A galaxy where justice, not force, determined the future. The children playing in the gardens would grow up in a universe their parents had fought to create. They would never know the fear of species-based tyranny. They would take for granted the idea that all sapient beings deserved respect and representation. But they would remember the stories of Luxara. They would understand that freedom was not free, that justice required vigilance, and that the greatest harmony came not from silencing different voices but from teaching them to sing together. The galaxy was vast, full of wonders yet to be discovered and species yet to be met. But now it was also something it had never been before. Free.